So welcome to It's Not All About the Numbers, the leadership podcast that doesn't just focus on the bottom line. Hello, my name is Chris and that is Mike.
Hi, everyone.
And our co-host this week is not here. And I'm going to put my hand up to this. Obviously we have some amazing speakers on and we have lots of planning calls around our speaker engagements. But I didn't get anybody in this week, so apologies for that. And I'll take it on the chin, Mike, because I can't blame Kira, who supports and produces the podcast with us. So I will take that one. But anyway, if you like what we're doing, with or without a co-host, then do subscribe and hit those 5 stars. It all really helps. So, Mike, judging by the microphone, you're back in the country. How are you? How's your week?
Back from Ethiopia. The week has been one of readjusting from an overnight flight, which is always interesting. So it's not really jet lag, but it definitely feels like jet lag. But I came straight to project plate spinning, as it were, because been doing I think they call it these days a fractional job, which basically means I'm running multiple projects. Just means that I had to couldn't have like a day off to recover. It was straight back into a workshop on a different project, which went well, but it was difficult. On the kind of like the non-work side, I've got some new glasses, which are expensive but remarkable.
They look great, by the way. And again, another ridiculous comment on a podcast, but they do look great. They remind me of I don't know. I'm going to say Buddy Holly, but you know,
I can take that.
Just a picture, just so that people can picture you.
Yeah,
but looking very good. No guitar in sight, but yeah.
Buddy Holly, far less talented. So got the new glasses, but I mean, getting back from Ethiopia and getting home, the main thing was, seeing the family, seeing the dogs, and getting back out walking. I noticed I've got a pedometer on my watch, and I noticed that whilst I was away without the motivation of a dog's nose poking me in the leg, I did far less walking whilst I was away. So it was good to get back and get moving again.
I've always said the dog is the best personal instructor I've ever had. So you can't ignore them, right?
Absolutely. And just on the lack of a co-host today, I mean, you say you messed up the booking. I thought it was just you wanted to have a long, deep chat with me. So
Well, it's I call it a special just to make you feel better, Mike. But yeah. Well, if we peek under the curtain, there's all sorts of chaos going on, but let's keep that curtain closed for the moment. So yeah, my week, I had a fun week actually. I went to see Hamilton, and I must admit, when I went to see it, it's not about the city of Hamilton. It's not about the Formula One driver of Hamilton. It's about one of the founding fathers, Hamilton, and the musical. Now, I'm only saying that because I didn't realize that before I went along. I made a huge amount of assumption around it because I'd heard it was played by black actors mainly. It was a lot of hip hop. So I just assumed that there was going to be some sort of, story relating to the South and maybe some civil rights and, all that thrown in there. But I got it completely wrong. It's actually about a very white man who, tried to be president and of the US and failed miserably. But it was a brilliant performance, brilliant show, and it was a bit of a birthday present from Mrs. A. So thank you for that. The work side of life, 2 conferences. I had a fantastic week actually on the speaker scene. So I was speaking at one P2P, which is procure to pay. So I've almost forgotten. Like an accounts payable process, let's call it. Buying stuff and paying for it. P2P transformation conference, just talking about the realities of transformation. Because back in the day, I led a transformation at John Lewis as a sort of the lead, the face of it, and the change management side of things. And then the other conference, which I went up to Nottingham to do. I got the geography very wrong on this because I thought it was just north of Milton Keynes, but actually it's not. It's just south of Leeds, so a long way from London. But on a Friday, I went to talk to a couple of hundred people on how to use Gen AI in their toolkit. And I know you love Gen AI, so that was really fun because it was genuinely new to most of the people who were there. And obviously, a lot of what we talk about normally is kind of time-old lessons learned, but actually, that was genuinely new and really interesting.
Well, I've got one comment to make. I mean, Nottingham, just north of Milton Keynes, I think is spoken like a true Southerner.
I know.
Wow,
well, it is. Yeah,
wow.
towny. I know.
On your P2P transformation gig, what were you actually talking about?
So it was a panel discussion where I was sharing the stage with a vendor who's obviously selling in software, but also the P2P manager, but that's a kind of director level role because he worked for Hugo Boss, and obviously a significant role.
Not Joe Lycett, but the actual Hugo Boss.
The Hugo Boss, the Hugo Boss, and great company to work for by the sounds of it. And he had led the transformation. I was kind of bringing in the program management point of view, the CFO point of view. But we all agreed that, it's less about the technology, right? It's actually more about people and process. And we were talking about the realities around that, where people still, no matter how much we say it, are happier buying implementation rather than change management. And we just gave everyone, an order really to say, look, work with your leadership to get this done in the right way. It doesn't necessarily lead to failure, but it certainly makes it harder for your team. It's harder to adopt, so we're just trying to bring very practical steps to everybody. I was going to say, and last but not least, we did the mastermind together, which is a great thing that we do almost every month, and I'm loving it more and more and more as we kind of tweak the format and get more and more people. But that was kind of what happened this week, so we're going to chat a little bit about that. What was your take on it?
On the mastermind?
Yeah.
So I think it's a fantastic kickstart. So basically, it's an 8 a.m. meeting that we do on a Tuesday once a month, and it's just a really nice kickstart to the week, to the day in terms of sharing and getting people to contribute to specific topics. And this week's one was particularly good because it's the one that I don't have to do as much preparation for, because it's the where we do the lean coffee. Yeah. And lean coffee is, for those who don't know, is like an open space format where the people that are participating generate the agenda and therefore the content. So that in itself for me is a really kind of rewarding way of doing things. So getting people to participate and share their knowledge and experience to each other is just fantastic.
Yeah, I agree with you, and we'll dig into the format a little bit later. But just in terms of the topics that came up, I thought it was so interesting. You're just asking people what's top of mind, what they need help with now, rather than trying to sort of push something to people. And one of the most voted for, in fact, the most voted for topic to talk about, and we both found this really interesting, was people wanted to hear more about other people's cock-ups and muck-ups, failure. And it was interesting because I think you posed that question, right? But everyone voted for it.
Yeah, I've been to a number of events over the years where in a safe space people want to talk about project failure, and so I thought I'd propose it to this group and see how it went. And as you say, absolutely everybody voted for it. And I think the thing that people find interesting is you can always find a good news story. You can always find where things have gone well, or you find where things have gone cataclysmically badly.
Yeah,
but you find very little in the middle. And I think
the good messages are pushed by the marketeers, and the bad messages are pushed by the media. Right?
Yeah.
But neither of those people exist in our world. So it's the peer learning and it's the peer conversation, right? The bit in the middle that is the reality, I think.
Exactly. And that kind of opportunity for people to almost say, well, how I've got the experience that I've got is by going through this project, and this didn't work in this project, and this is why I think why, and this is what I learned from it. I think is a fascinating opportunity for people, almost to therapy, really, to sort of say, and that came across in a couple of the conversations that came out. It was very much about, I've observed these things, I've learned these things as a result of this not going as swimmingly as it could.
And in regard to the topic and the discussion, right, obviously we'll keep all of this anonymous, but there were some really interesting messages that came out. The first thing that I noted, and I actually sort of document the comments anonymously when we do the mastermind, was that everyone agreed understanding failure is helpful. And I think that's such a obvious statement, right? But I think in practice, we don't operate like that. We don't operate thinking understanding failure is helpful. In fact, we recoil from failure. That's almost like our first response, especially in the workplace, where we're sort of managing lots of different things, managing motivations, managing messages, managing our own careers. It's like, if I can avoid failure, then it's good. But actually, I think that first one around sort of everyone agreeing behind closed doors, understanding failure is helpful.
So I agree, and I think that what you're seeing also is there's almost like a conflict in how we're expected to manage and communicate things that exist at the moment. So you've got the old school approach to project management, which is very much we'll focus on what our outcomes are, and we'll do everything we can to hit the outcomes that we've set at the start. And then you've got the kind of more agile approaches, which are much more fail fast. Try things, let's iterate, let's try as we go. I mean, lessons from software development, let's build something, see if it works. If it doesn't work, let's kill it and build something else and see if that works. And if it does work, great, let's iterate on top of it. And I think that the old school, for want of a better way of putting it, whilst they want to be more agile and fail fast, actually reporting and financing and budgeting and outcome based projects don't accept that. They don't accept you spending half your budget to say, well, actually, we tried that and it didn't go well, guys. We best stop.
No, and referring back to another podcast that we had, I think it was Giuseppe who was saying that, unfortunately, the processes lock people into projects as well. So even if you want to be agile, you're locked into a procurement process or you're locked into a contract that it's actually weirdly better for you to deliver and fail than to course correct, which just drives me mad. There was on that point around, failure being okay. I think there was a really good comment in it as well that failure is fine because learning through doing is more effective.
Yeah.
And I actually, that's sort of verbatim, but I'd actually sort of put a small failure is fine and just put the small in front of that, because I don't think we want to, feed the media with even more headlines, because there's plenty around that at the moment. But small failure is fine because it's accepting that, we don't know everything. And I think you've been very clear in the past to say, look, the hierarchies in business are changing. The boss in the olden days used to be the one with all the experience and the knowledge, and you just had to get in front of them to know what to do. Now we're all learning top to bottom, particularly, that Gen AI conversation that I was having, like there was nobody in the room who really got it completely. Not even me. I put my hand up and said, it's changing so fast. My presentation was done a week ago, and now I probably need to update it again. So learning through doing was seen as a very effective way, but are we really empowering people to do that?
And that's really interesting, because I mean, what's going through my head as you're talking is how we learn as kids. So you have how you learn as kids is clearly your parents set you parameters, and don't cross the road when there's a car coming is one of those parameters. But in other things, you learn by doing something stupid, like touching something hot. You learn it's hot. By falling over, you learn not to fall over. There's definitely inbuilt in humans the ability to remember things better if you failed at it, because it kind of sticks. So
Yeah.
I definitely think there's something in it. But I was one of the conversations I was having when I was out in Ethiopia around digital in Ethiopia was there's less acceptance of failure in digital in Ethiopia. So actually, if you're investing in a private sector tool as a government, you expect it to be successful. And actually, if it's not successful, the damage that does to the reputation of the company that's built the tool is so great that actually you end up in this kind of scenario where people are very slow and laborious in developing things, rather than being quick and agile and fleet of foot as you would expect in the kind of agile delivery software ecosystem in the UK. That's not to say one's right and one's wrong, or to be too disparaging. It's just the cultural fear of failure.
So, okay. So I was going to say, so, is it the fact that they don't like agile and they expect it to be just sort of right first time? Or is it that there's culturally, they just don't want to lose face or something on not delivering?
I think it's the latter. I think that trust is hard won, and hard earned. And it's very much about individual trust. And if you don't deliver the thing that you said that you're going to deliver for whatever reason, for perfectly good reasons, then what gets impacted is your personal trustability, if that's a word. So you may not know it. The interactions that you have may not change, but actually what's happened is that kind of level of trust that there is in you may change. And that's just like such a big question. And it does come down to this acceptance of failure point. There's obviously broader things, but the cultural norm of building stuff now, software, pushing it out there and then iterating it once it's got out there, and actually it might not work brilliantly, and accepting that is absolutely a no-no.
There are people who are sort of saying that authenticity is the way to build trust. Authenticity is about showing vulnerability, and by actually showing failure, this is actually a marketing principle as well, that showing failure actually makes you more likable. Because, and it's just psychology that if you have strengths that people can believe in, and you mess up every now and again, then you're much more likely to have a following and people to like you. But if you're obviously incompetent and you fail, it doesn't work, right? But it's I think it sort of flies in the face of that approach, right?
So it's almost like a generation of leadership. And the example that's going through my head is, just imagine if Fujitsu had failed fast on the Horizon project with the post office, and actually right up front, they'd started to notice things weren't working, and when the post office started to notice things weren't working, they actually stood up and said, "This isn't working as we expected, guys," rather than the 20 odd years of smoke and mirrors. So that very much is a culture. That was very much a culture where failure was not an option. And actually what it ended up being is the cataclysmic failure.
Interesting stuff. So I just want to dig in a little bit into some of the content, and then we'll talk about, possibly what we're learning as individuals by coming along to things like masterminds, because I really believe in peer learning. I've always said that, and it's a sort of premise for everything I do now. And I just want to sort of explain that with a few examples. But some of the content that and the comments that people were making, they're really insightful. So people sort of putting their hands up and saying, "Look, I mucked up. I did this." Now, there's a sort of solidarity there, which I think you just don't get by reading an article, right? Or, reading some thought leadership. And people are actually learning from each other. They're learning the hard yards. And that type of learning, I just don't think you get anywhere else, do you?
I don't think so. I'm speaking for myself. I don't learn brilliantly from reading articles and that approach. Talking to people, absolutely, you get that sense of what the thing is. You can inquire a bit more about what the thing is, whatever it is, and dig into it. That so that having that opportunity to talk to people with experience, I think, broadens your own knowledge, and you can sort of be more inquisitive because it's not passive. The article's written from one perspective. It's not dynamic.
Yeah.
It's not, it doesn't relate to the other things that you're talking about. So I think beautiful about the peer learning approach is there's a series of conversations that end up intertwining and interlinking, and you can pitch what you say based on what you've already heard. And that dynamicism, can't say the word, that adaptability of the approach
Very, very adaptable.
Yeah, exactly. That adaptability, I think, is what makes it so rich.
And you really learn a range of things, right? It's not just like a hard conversation or a soft conversation. It's a sort of bit of everything. And I think by doing that, you see the connections, the synapses are cracking, as you're having these conversations. And it could be something as simple as, I don't know, I did this, don't do that. And then you sort of think, okay, I was just about to do that. There was a comment around joining a project sort of midway through, and because they were a new person in the business, they thought they'd do the 100 days approach, and they'd listen. And actually, the comment was, I was way too passive. I was too passive. I should have actually backed myself in terms of being an expert, even coming in new, because after 6 months, the project was failing. The initiatives that I was involved in were failing, and it was really gutting to do that. So there's kind of like these real, nuanced learnings that you get. There's also like the really hard learnings, like just make sure you get buy-in and make sure you get your clear requirements and all this sort of stuff, which we know. But it's a real mixture of learning, right?
Yeah, I think so. It's a small group of people, and I think within that small group of people, what you're describing is people showing their vulnerability in this particular example. So they're prepared to show that they aren't perfect, which is not what we're trained, inverted commas, to do. We're trained to put our best foot forward at all times, but actually in this kind of peer learning contact, that vulnerability is quite, I think is quite affirming to other people. It means you build trust with each other, back to trust again, but you can build trust within that group. So then when you have a problem or you have a challenge which is real right now, I would hope that you've built a network of people outside of your organization who enough about, they know enough about you that they trust you and they could support you. So actually the peer bit of it, not just the learning bit, but the peer bit of it, I think is the critical bit, because back to what I said right at the start, I'm a fractional project person now. I struggle to say that as well. Fractional project person, which means I'm working on multiple projects, but it also means that I don't have like the same team around me all of the time. So building that peer group, which is supportive, is absolutely critical to not going completely bananas.
Yeah. I think individually there's the learning, but like you say, there's the sort of solidarity. And I always joke, actually, not so much at the masterminds, but at our meetups, that people are there to network and learn, but actually people are there for therapy.
Yeah.
And that's okay, right? I think, when I've ever managed people inside a business, and I still do today with a smaller team, but I always said to people, look, you need external advisors. You need your informal advisory board around you. And, it came very naturally to me. That's probably why I do what I do. But it doesn't come naturally to a lot of people. So they need to find trusted, like-minded people to have those conversations. And I think when you find it, there's that cheesy expression, you've found your tribe. But I really understand why people say that, because it's like, look, I feel like someone's got my back. And even if I pop in for a bit of, light-hearted therapy, or actually take something really tangible away, it's, this group of people have got my back. And I think individually there's so much, to offer.
I was actually just reflecting back to another podcast that we've done, and we were chatting with Andrew Newman a few weeks ago, and I worked with Andrew on the open DEFRA stuff. The link is, in order to achieve the target that we were setting the open DEFRA stuff of releasing lots of data, there were people across different organizations that needed to work together to do that, often or sometimes not supported by the organizations they were in. So actually that peer network bit and that peer learning bit and peer support bit was critical to supporting that person, giving them what they needed to be able to sort of push a rock up a hill at times, but also it was critical in achieving the outcome. So that nurturing and that support network outside of the hierarchy, I think, is just when it works, it's wonderful.
Absolutely. And we try our best, don't we? We try our best. Whether, you as a expert facilitator and me just being a bit of a motivator, we do try our best. So
I've definitely been called worse than expert facilitator.
A fractional portfolio.
Don't try and think of what it is.
Whatever it is, yeah. Yeah, but it's actually, it's a bit of a buzzword at the moment. We have it in our space, fractional CFOs. I've even seen fractional CEOs. Whatever cap fits. To be honest, I quite like the way that we reinvent consultancy over the years.
Exactly.
Great. Well, that was kind of a combination of what happened this week and a chat about why I would encourage you, why I'm sure Mike would encourage you to join a mastermind. It doesn't have to be ours, and if you're not in finance, or if you're not in our space, then just Google masterminds or communities, because I'm sure you'll benefit from it. Now, it's at this point where we like to answer a question. And if you are interested in asking a question to us, it's podcast@generationcfo.com, or reach out to Mike and myself directly. And what I thought would be quite nice to do is, there was a lot of talk at the mastermind around the failure topic, and that definitely took up most of the conversation. But second to that, and it almost equal, but second to that, was conversation about how can I use AI to transform more effectively? And there were some really good conversations in there about use of technology, understanding the capability, change in general, when we're talking about these new buzzwords like AI. So I thought we could just touch on that. And Mike, I don't know how comfortable you are talking about AI transformation, but I'll kick it off. So there's an assumption actually with AI at the moment that it will be more efficient and effective than the human. If only we can work out how to use it. But actually, I think the consensus in the group was, although we are starting to see the large language models and chatbots appearing in our software, which was the goal of every product owner last year, to make sure that their product had some sort of chat functionality. It's not always quicker, and it's certainly not to be taken as fact or accurate. So some of the examples that were coming through is, I can just search for my files by asking the chat where they are, which means that I don't have to worry about structuring my files or ordering my files in the right way. Well, I wouldn't recommend doing that, because you might have SOX compliance, or you might have an audit at some point in time, or there's also the fact that they might present the wrong file, because the way these models work, it's only making a suggestion. It's not necessarily fact. But there's multiple ways we can use AI, to transform more effectively. I think the Gen AI space is a very specific space, but but generally, AI is coming into process automation. It's coming into sort of decision support. It's coming into every sort of operational process that we have. So there you go. Had a stab at it.
So yeah, definitely. I mean, SOX compliance sounds like something out of Harry Potter. That was the first thing that popped into my head.
Yeah.
But I mean, I think that one of the things here is using the term AI to be all encompassing and mean lots of different things. So the conversation around searching for files. I know somebody that when I first started working at the Open Data Institute, or however long that was ago now, 7 years ago, 6 years ago now, said, oh, yeah, don't worry about the file structure. If you just give it a good name, the Google search on Google Workspace will do the job. And to some extent, that's true. And that's actually no different to that description around using AI the other day. It's the same description. It's as long as you're typing in the right thing to look for, you'll find it. So there's that bit. But then the other bit, which we talked a little bit about OCR, using OCR and AI scanning invoices and errors and being able to spot the errors. And what just went through my mind was it's almost like we're trying to fix the wrong problem. And I was thinking of autonomous cars, and I heard a really interesting podcast around autonomous vehicles, which is autonomous vehicles at the moment, where they've got to is they can largely drive themselves in most scenarios now, but you have to pay attention just in case that child steps out, or just in case the deer runs across the road, or just in case something different happens, which is fundamentally what humans are bad at. They're bad at paying attention to nothing. Oh, there's something I need to pay attention to. We get bored, we start wandering off and thinking of different things, which is exactly the symptom that was described around digitizing invoices. It's like, you can digitize 1,000, but actually one of those might be out by an order of magnitude. Who's checking? And it's almost that it needs to be the other way around. It's almost that then we need to use the technology to fix what we're bad at, which is the boredom bit, rather than we then have to spot. Do you see what I mean? I'm not sure I'm explaining it brilliantly, but
I remember the conversation, and funny enough, it's come up in a few conversations I had, at the conferences, and we did a talks as well on VAR, video assisted refereeing and stuff like that. It's like, what are we trying to solve? What problems are we trying to solve? So starting with the AI conversation, it's almost like people trying to whack-a-mole. That's not the right approach. And it was around, how do I don't know, how do I get my team to use AI in the way that I think they need to use it? And in this case, it was, stop being so black and white about what the AI can do. It's not, it's not sort of right or wrong. It's always wrong, and the human needs to check that work. So it was, and we then moved on to sort of data literacy and digital literacy and people trying to sort of think about using AI as a scientist, not as an accountant or a business person, right? Because then you do actually start to think things differently. But it was a complex conversation, and there's a million use cases out there for using AI. But I would just say, make sure that you're, as you said, Mike, focused on the outcomes, taking people on the journey to solve a problem, rather than just trying to use it on a Friday project, because that also came out in the mastermind where, people were almost being asked to do Friday projects and not really given the time or the support to do it. And it's frankly just a waste of everyone's time.
The thing that's underlying all of this for me is it's like other things that I've seen over the last 20 odd years, which is the next big thing is always talked about in a way which is impenetrable to some people, or it seems like magic to some people. So actually there's a challenge on all of us to talk about, in this case, AI in a sensible way that people can understand. And I remember really clearly having a conversation with a senior leader, he says, to keep it anonymous, who was managing a digital team but wasn't a digital native, and they were saying, well, how do I challenge, somebody says that something can do something, how do I know? And I said, the simple answer is they should be able to explain it really clearly to you, and if they can't, it might be bullshit, so call bullshit and then get them to explain to you. And everybody has to be able to explain stuff in ways that your mother-in-law could understand. It's got to be that's the challenge.
Yeah, or your father-in-law.
Well,
absolutely right. Okay, that leaves us with wrapping up with some good data, bad data. Now, I've actually found some good data, and I'm gonna do a bit of bad data as well. But first of all, I have some good news. Now, I think I've mentioned this on the podcast before, and Mike, I think you were even watching rugby the other day, but I'm a big rugby fan. And there has been so much negative conversation about the game at all levels, particularly at the young level and the most senior level, because of concussion and concussion leading to all sorts of issues. But I found some great data this week, and hopefully this isn't too political, but it's just the facts from this bit of research that has been done. An ex-player who's actually a data scientist as well has created a rugby gum shield to record the collisions in rugby. And what they've actually found with a study in, I think it was New Zealand and in the UK, specific to rugby, so not using kind of NFL data, because there's loads of American data on this, but specific to rugby, they found that actually 86% of forces in rugby are the same as running and jumping. So, okay, there's 14% that are not, but again, this is about trying to shift perceptions, or what's the story, that comes from the data. Now, in the past, we had tons of anecdotal data. People would get a concussion and then they would fall sick, or they would end up with dementia, and it was just almost just difficult to sort of break that down and then change things in the game. What was the learning point? But actually now we're seeing that the huge amount of the game actually is akin to running and jumping, right? Also, they found that most of the contact doesn't equal significant force. So, and I understand this as an ex-player. Now, you might watch TV and you might go, wow, that was a big hit. But actually, when you're hit in a tackle, if you're actually in the right position, or if you're ready for it and you land well, you don't actually experience that significant force. So I'm going down a rabbit hole here, aren't I? So it's like it's not the same. Having a big hit is not the same as being close to getting concussion. And what I liked about this as being a bit of good data, just to wrap it up, is that it shows more of the story. So when you think about the health benefits of playing rugby, with the risks clearly laid out like this, then it basically gives a fuller story, a fuller picture for you to make a decision whether to play rugby or not. So that was my good data, and great to sort of have more data to look at.
So I really like that, and so I agree with what you've just said there about it. You can then do a better balance of the risks versus the benefits. The other bit that, just to add to that, is I'm pretty sure that all of in the Six Nations this year, most of the teams were wearing these gum shields. Yep. Most of the players were wearing these gum shields, and for that 14% where the contact isn't the same as running and jumping, and it does cause an impact that's significant. Because the gum shields are being worn, players that are exhibiting absolutely no symptoms can now be taken off and assessed and looked at.
And what I love about this is that sort of relating it to business and what we do, you're moving from almost like a gut approach to your decision making, right? You're saying, well, I can kind of see stuff happening around me. I can see people getting hit in the head, having lots of concussion, and then 20 years later being affected by it. But that's not data driven. That's just anecdotal. So that's the gut approach. Whereas this is now a data driven approach. We're seeing the data. We're not just we're seeing it specifically for the sport as well. And when you balance all the risks up, good data and bad data, you can make an informed decision. Which and that's what I like about this bit of good data. So moving on to the bad data. So this just is hilarious. And sorry if this is a little bit sort of finance related, but I'm sure a lot of people here have to deal with HMRC. But this week we have heard that despite the HMRC having all sorts of performance issues, chasing everyone for tax, making sure that people are taxed properly, they have decided to close their telephone helpline for 6 months while they get their shit together, quite frankly. And I just find it hilarious. I know that there are issues and it's a government department and there's lots of things that, probably are holding up that department. But I cannot imagine a business leader turning around to their team or their stakeholders saying, hey, look, we've got a bit of a performance issue in the team at the moment. Can you come back in 6 months? Well, I just need to catch my breath. It's shocking, right? I don't know whether you had a chance to read the article, Mike, but it's just crazy.
I've skimmed it. The thing that I'm really worried about actually is when this podcast is coming out, because it actually sounds so much like an April Fool's Day joke. As somebody that's got a business that has to report to HMRC, and if you miss your deadlines, you get fined. It just seems remarkable that this can even be true. So I'm keeping my powder dry to find out whether this is real or not, because I just can't believe it. I can't believe it.
Anyway, I'm going to wrap it up there. Make sure that you're part of a community or part of a mastermind if you think that that's going to help. And make sure you are making data-driven decisions. And, playing rugby if you want to play rugby.
I'm too old to play rugby.
Well, you saw the pain of it a couple of weeks ago, didn't you?
Correct.
Dorchester Thirds.
Dorchester Thirds.
Dorchester Thirds. Love it. That is thank you from me. And thank you, Mike.
Thanks, everybody.
And remember, it's not all about the numbers.